Okay, so I'm going to go through MRP here. So kind of everything to do with MRP. So this will be a bit of a kind of 101 overview. It'll probably get a little bit technical in places, but it's designed to give you kind of enough information to be dangerous, knowing that you'll likely have to talk to us about specifics afterwards of how certain things work or the best way to set things up or similar. We have clients, quite often they're asking us about how they should handle certain situations, or probably more importantly, what the MRP does to start with. So this is designed to show some examples in our system with some generic products and show some of the things that you may or may not want to do through here. So firstly, a couple of bits of explanation. I expect this video will probably be 20 minutes or so by the time it's done, but I'll talk through some of the logic now. So what the MRP does first of all, so it's Material Requirements Planning is what it stands for. Basically looking at what are your sales, what purchases do you already have in, what transfers do you need, what are your assemblies, and trying to basically boil it down to what product do you need and when. As you probably expect, there's a whole load of rules behind that, which I'll try and explain without going into crazy intricate detail. That then give you a result when you run the MRP to go, what is the current state of play? So firstly, MRP lives under inventory and then MRP. You may or may not have to add it through your subscription. If you don't have access, you should be able to access a 30-day trial if you haven't already had that. It works on the back of some day-to-day transactions that you'll already be doing, so purchasing, sales, transfers, and then probably most importantly, product information and location information. So starting with product information, you want to make sure as a minimum that you've got suppliers and prices against products. So if I look at, for example, these aluminium screws, so this is a fake furniture company. We're going to have some assemblies where we might need chairs and we need to buy in timber and glue and screws and things like that. We might also have things like dining suites where we need tables and chairs to put them together. So first most important thing, under suppliers, you need to have at least one supplier and price in here. Fairly obviously, this is so the system knows where do I buy this product from when I have a need for it. You can have multiples, and there are then some things that you can do to tell it to look at the quickest supplier, the latest supplier, or the cheapest supplier. I would also recommend against the suppliers, further down here, putting in lead and safety times, because that will just make things easier for the system to say, you need this on the 1st of May, therefore you need to order it 2 weeks prior. So lead times just get entered in here, for example. You can also enter safety stock. So what that will do is say, it takes 14 days to get stock in, and additionally, I'd always like to keep 14 days of stock in as well. Side note, you can set this up per supplier, and against each supplier, you can set it up per location. So if it takes quite a while to get things into LA, but you can get them into Melbourne fairly quickly, Sydney fairly quickly, and it takes a little while to get to the UK, you can do that as well there. These, however, are safe enough to leave at 0. The system will still work. It will just assume you need to order the product on the day you want it. It won't allow for any kind of delivery time or similar. So for best accuracy, fill this in, but the system will still work. Whereas without a supplier, it will not work at all because it doesn't know where to get the product from. So bare minimum, suppliers against products. If you've got products that are assembled, then you need to have assembly bill of materials in there, or production bill of materials. You should already have those because if you're using the system and if you're using assemblies or production, you have to have the bill of materials in there. However, to show an example here, I've got this dining set, which is set just here as an assembly bill of materials. And if I go to the bill of materials, this needs chairs and tables. Now, it may also be that that chair needs timber and glue and nails and similar, and there'll be levels of bill of materials, but we'll talk about that a little bit further on. So I've got a bunch of products set up here, and those products have got bill of materials and suppliers against them. That's part number 1. Now, if you've only got one location, the next bit is fairly simplistic. If you've got multiple sets of locations, this is where things can get a little bit more complicated and probably where you'll need like a workshop or some discussions with us. So if we go settings and then reference books, and then jump into our locations, I've got a range of different locations here, including some things like shop floors and co-manufacturing locations, which relate to the production module. But let's just use one as an example here. So let's say just say for the UK warehouse. The important thing that we're looking at here is these supply rules. So I don't have any supply rules right now. So if I ran the MRP for the UK right now, it will say, I don't know what you want me to do with these products. It will tell me that there's demand, but it will not tell me what to do with them because it doesn't know where do you want to get these products from. If I filled out this supply rule and said I want to get them from the cheapest supplier, I could still then have a problem if there are no suppliers listed against a product. So you need that kind of that coupling of suppliers and supply rules. So as a simple example, in the UK warehouse, if I add a supply rule, now you can set different supply rules by different products. At this point, you cannot base it on excluding products, only including products. I have put a feature request in for that. I'd like to see that. But you can say, for example, for chairs, I want to go and buy them this way. For dressers, I want to go and buy them this way. But you can't exclude products. You can't say for products without this tag or without this category. In this case, I'll keep it simple. All products, what I want to do is I want to purchase from the supplier with the lowest price. And I could then say, if that still doesn't give me enough, then instead I want to purchase from the supplier with the lowest lead time, and so on and so on and so forth. I'll keep this simple. Supplier with the lowest price, so let's go supplier with the lowest price, or if not, the latest supplier. So if we don't have pricing in the system, say it's a market product where the price changes all the time, just use whoever we used last time. And then if not, don't do anything with it. So that's just a dead simple example. I'm going to show a much more complicated example in a moment, where you say, cool, for the UK, I want to purchase from the supplier with the lowest price. If that doesn't work, look at the latest supplier. If not, just leave the demand there. So if we now jump into the MRP, I'll show some of these settings, and again, I'll make them these more complex as we're going along. First thing to note is you can only have one MRP running at a time. So I've just completed that one there to be able to start another one, just because they can conflict if you're adding orders and doing things at the same time. So we'll run the MRP. There's what looks like a lot of settings here, but they are relatively self-explanatory, and you can save your presets so that you don't have to put them in each time or remember them each time. So firstly, just some general settings. Do you want to load the demand with details? Now you'll see that there's little tooltips here that will generally explain what each option is doing, but I'll give you a bit of a brief here as well with some best practice. So if you tick to load the demand with, or actually let's go the other way. If you don't have this ticked, the system will say, cool, in the next month you need 5 widgets. It won't tell you what you need those 5 widgets for in a breakdown. If you tick this, it will then tell you you need 1 for this sale, 2 for this production, 3 for this transfer, you need 6 in total. It does take quite a bit longer. It will take 3 or 4 times longer to run the MRP if you have that ticked on, because it needs to go and check every single calculation. Well, sorry, it's always accurate. It doesn't need to check every single calculation. It needs to present every single calculation. So I generally recommend the first few times you run the MRP, run it without load demand if you're in a rush. However, I would recommend loading demand when you're testing the system so you can see why it's telling you to do certain things. Planning period, where do you want to look at? So if I go for this month, it's going to look at any sales, production, demand, forecast or similar for the next month. That will also include any overdue demand. So if we've got products that are negative, it's going to include them in this because it says, well, you need them, you already need them in, you need to sort that now. In this case, I'll run it for the UK, but location is fairly obvious, and I won't do it for a certain customer. Then you have the option of how do you want to read the supply required. So you've either got procuring up to the stock level, or the minimum before reorder level, which if you hover over here, will explain how it's calculated. So it's going to use minimum before reorder as well as the stock level, whereas, minimum before reorder just does the minimum amount that's there. So if you say we need to have at least 10 in, it will order 10 if you've got none. Stock level goes minimum before reorder plus reorder quantity. If you don't tick either of those, then you can tick include overdue demand and it will just look at what you've got less than 0 of. So I'll do the minimum before reorder, overdue gets added, and you can't untick that because if you need the minimum before reorder, you at least need the negative as well because it makes that up. If you tick to include draft and planned supply orders, then as it says there, if you've got draft orders already in the system, then it will include those as well, so you don't go double ordering products. So it will know that you've already got a purchase order in the system, don't worry about it. I generally recommend not ticking that because just because you've got draft purchase orders, they could be from years ago and you've forgotten about them. It's worth keeping them tidy, obviously, though. Bill of materials explosion, that basically says, so back to my point about the dining set, do you want the system to tell you you need a dining set, or do you want it to tell you we need a dining table and dining chairs, or going a little further, if you don't have dining table and dining chairs, do you want it to tell you we need the timber, the glue, the screws and so on? As a general rule, it's best to have that bill of materials explosion on. Forecast demand, I'll come back to in a moment. So this is going to look at what do we need this month or overdue in the UK warehouse based on that rule of buying from the cheapest supplier or buying from the latest supplier. It's going to look at the minimum before reorder, and in this case, it's also looking at authorized sales. We're not going to look at any planned production. We're not going to look at any draft transfers or anything. So it's just going to look at authorized sales that need stock and anything that's minimum before reorder. Here, it's going to draft all of our results. So if we run this, you do still get an option to check everything, which I'll show you in a moment. But if we run everything and say, yes, I want to generate all those supply orders, the reason they're called supply orders is because they could be purchases or assemblies or transfers, whatever. They're just supplying product. It will just draft them. It's generally safer so that you can then check it afterwards, make sure that the information is correct and so on. But once you get confident with the MRP, you should be able to change this to just ordered, and then the purchase orders will be straight in there, the transfers will be straight in there, and you can carry on. Last option here, consolidate suggestions by source. What this essentially means is where we've got the planning period set to a month, if we don't tick this, then if we've got some sales on the 5th of February, let's say, because I'm recording this in February, some sales on the 5th, some sales due on the 10th, some sales due on the 20th, that will issue 3 purchase orders for those 3 sets of goods. If we tick to consolidate, it will just say you need to do this 1 purchase order to get these products in for this month. So the advantage to that is you're doing 1 purchase order to the supplier, you're getting in what you need, you don't need to worry too much about multiple deliveries and so on. The disadvantage is potential cash flow or having too much stock in the warehouse. So if you're doing, for example, import-export, where you need to get a container on the water so that it can be here in 4 weeks, for example, then you'll probably want to consolidate everything. If you're ordering in from local type suppliers, you may not want to consolidate. So with all that said, oh crud, I meant to tick consolidation there, so this is going to give me a lot of results. So here, this is going to give me 1 purchase order for every date that we need products. This will take a little bit longer. It's going to load the demand with details as well. So it's going to tell me when we need 100 widgets, why we need 100, maybe 70 are for the stock level, 10 are for Bob, 5 are for Sarah, and so on. And it's going to try and get them from the cheapest supplier by default. What I'll do after I've run this, on the next example, I'll consolidate the suggestions as well, is I'll then look at, in a moment, while this is running, the Melbourne warehouse. And I've got some more complicated rules there where we might say, okay, if we don't have stock, try and transfer some in from Sydney, because that's a local warehouse. If not, try and see if we can produce them. And then if not, go out to the supplier. So then it's going to fall down lots of rules. And then you can say, well, if I need 100 of these, for example, see if we can bring any of them in from Sydney, but don't let Sydney's stock level go down so that they run out of all their stock. There's lots of kind of if this, then that rules that we can do. So in a minute, if this hasn't finished running by the time I shut up, I'll just pause it for a moment. Because it's not consolidating suggestions and because I'm putting the details in the demand, this will take a little while to run. It can sometimes take 5 or 10 minutes to run because it's doing basically an entire month's worth of calculation and forecasting for you on your behalf. Obviously, if you want it to make it run quicker, either consolidate the suggestions and or untick load demand with details, which you're normally able to do once you run this a few times and you've got confidence in all your settings. I'll pause this for now and I'll let you know how long it takes to run in the end. I would expect it normally to be a couple of minutes, so probably about another minute or two more. Okay, so back here on day 2, I'm not actually quite sure why. The MRP took an hour to run, so I'm just working through that with Cin7 support just to see. There are quite a lot of errors, which is what I wanted to show how various things work. But looking at the activity log, yeah, when I ran it yesterday, it took basically a full hour to run, which is more than I would expect with a demo site because we don't have a huge amount of sales in there. But it could be correct, so we've got a lot of complicated production materials and a lot of errors. So what you will expect to see is when the MRP runs, so as these are all the settings that I used before, I need to remind myself of that more than you because I did this yesterday. But these are all the settings that I could run. I didn't consolidate the suggestions by source. We'll talk about that in a moment. And this is the result that you will get. So the first result that you get shows independent demand, dependent demand, current supply, and total demand. Now, looking at this here, okay, this is a simple example. This will show a little bit more when we look at the Melbourne warehouse, which has got some more complicated rules. So independent demand is how much demand do we have in and of this product itself. Now you'll see that almost all of these are 50 or 250 or simple round numbers because that's our minimum stock level. So back up here where we said we want to procure the minimum before reorder. In most cases, because we don't use this warehouse a huge amount, this is our minimum order amount. You can always, because I set this setting on to load the demand with details, you can always click on this to see where it's coming from. So you can see that it needs the stock level and it needs 50 for that information. You can also see examples where there is current supply. So you'll see we need 50 armless dining chairs. But if I click on here, we have 48 already in stock. Therefore, our total demand is 2. We don't here have any dependent demand. However, just to explain, dependent demand is what will happen when, for example, Melbourne needs some stock and you've asked it to transfer it from Sydney. Sydney will have demand that is dependent on Melbourne, essentially. So independent demand is you need this product in this warehouse for a sale specific to that product in that warehouse. Dependent demand has come from somewhere else, from another rule or another process. Show a bit more of this in a moment. Now, I've used this as a very simple example with the simple demands to just show some of the rules and errors and things like that. Then I'll jump into Melbourne and show it a little bit more complicated, hopefully without having to wait an hour for it. So if I go to suggested supply orders, this is first of all where it will show here is everything that you need to order in. Now you'll see there's something that's required. This actually might be why it's taken so long because this was technically required 3 years ago. And you'll see if we hover over and click on this item, it says the supply orders required by date is earlier than the current date. So basically you already needed this 3 years in this case, just forget that because it's a demo system. But you already needed this before, so you're already behind. It's basically warning you. Similarly, this here, if you click on this one here, is saying that because there's a lead time set up, which you remember I did on the first video, first part of this video, because there's a lead time set up, you cannot get this on time. So you need this today. You cannot get it on time because you told us it's going to take 7 days or 14 days or whatever to get it into stock. You'll also see here that there's multiple sets of records for one supplier because I didn't consolidate that source. And you'll notice here there's a required by date and then underneath it is effectively an order date. That's why there are 3 different orders showing here because it's basically saying, well, you need to order the products that have no lead time today. You needed to order this product that has a 1 week lead time last week, and or I think it might be 14 days lead time. And there's a product that has 30-day lead time. You needed to order that last month. So it's a bit odd because it's looking backwards here, but that's why it's showing the 3 sets of products. You can always tick these and merge them, and it will put it into one purchase order for you. You can also open up here to see what these products are at any point, and you can split purchases out as well. So in an absolutely perfect world, which does not exist, what you would do is click all of these, hit confirm, and the system will generate all those draft purchase orders for you. Remembering again that they're a draft because of this setting here. However, we'll get to that in a moment with a more complicated example. The other couple of things worth looking at are the results and the errors. So, sorry, not the results, the errors and the tabs under errors, sorry. So we've got some critical errors. So first of all, we've got some products that have a production bill of materials that cannot be produced because the location that they're set to produce in is not a shop floor location. It's basically just a setup issue that we've got in a demo site. I'll fix that in a moment. Then we've got a bunch of products that don't have suppliers. So this is back to my earlier point. We need to make sure there's a supplier against every single product. So we need to make sure of that there. Then we've got products where it's saying that there's no supply action for certain locations, which is fine because we only ran this for the UK. But going back to when I went into settings, reference books, locations, this is basically saying, like, for Los Angeles warehouse, you haven't told me what you want to do with that, which is fine at the moment. And that's most of the errors there. So those are okay. There are also other tabs. We have no warnings. We may get some when we do Melbourne. And we've got some general information that we don't have delivery planning between locations. That's not a huge problem. That's why it's on the information not critical. Basically, you can set delivery planning. So you can say, for example, I always want to supply Melbourne from Sydney on Mondays and Wednesdays, for example. And then it will look to generate those on the right days. So that's generated a whole heap of demand there. Like I said before, that's very much a kind of demo because we've got all the flat round amounts. What I'll do now is I'll redo this against the Melbourne main location with a few more complicated rules as well, and should get a bit of a more dynamic result to show you as well. Before I do that, I'll talk through the settings of Melbourne, and then after I do that, I'll also talk about forecasting as well. So we'll jump back to reference books here. Hopefully this one won't take an hour to generate either. I'll turn the details off, which should help it as well. So we've got production facility, which is a shop floor. We've got Melbourne warehouse main. And we've got a supply rule in here already. Okay, so what I'm going to say here is if there is demand in Melbourne warehouse, if it's a product we can produce, try and produce it in the production facility. If you can't produce it there, then try and produce it in the main location. And the difference for that is basically related to assemblies or production bill of materials, because we've got production set up in the production facility. We've got assembly set up to the main warehouse. If not, see if we can get it from Sydney. And this is where I said before about you can choose the rules here. So take it from Sydney, and we can either say take everything that Sydney's got, or leave Sydney with its minimum level so you don't end up just like robbing Peter to pay Paul, or leave Sydney with its stock level, so minimum before reorder and reorder quantity. So let me just have a quick look and see that I'm not going to completely screw things over here. We do not have a huge amount in Sydney at all, okay. Okay, but there is some sofas in there. There's not a huge amount otherwise. So what I'll do is just say that I can take everything from Sydney. And here, I'll say that I want to fulfill partial demand. So what that basically means is if you need 300 products, but Sydney's only got 100 units, I'll allow it to take those 100 and go get the other 200 from the next rule down. If we set it to total demand only, if you need 300, if Sydney has 298, it won't take any of those. It will go and purchase the whole 300. So it's trying to make things as efficient as possible. So if your warehouses are close And in this scenario, just as an example, like what we're saying is like Sydney and Melbourne have transport between them. If we're ordering in from China or the US. So we'd rather avoid that because that needs like a month of planning. So I'll take whatever Sydney has. And if not, then we'll go and purchase from the supplier with the lowest price. So with all of that set, I will now just go back and as a reminder, I can't have two MRPs running at the same time because they'll conflict with each other. So I'll take that one off. I'll add a new one. I will not load the demand this time because that should speed it up a little bit. So let's look at this week for a moment. Let's look at, let's look at Melbourne. Let's go to the minimum before reorder with the bill of materials. Include all sales because I've got a lot of drafted sales in the system. Consolidate it by source and run that. So I'm going to leave this running without pausing for just a moment again, because I would imagine that without loading the demand with details, which I would like to do, and I'll do that separately, I'll pause the video and do that separately to show you how certain things are working. There we go. That's much more what I would expect. So I think loading the demand with the details and in that location where there was a bunch of errors caused me that issue. So here, great. Now you'll see, first off, these are now not teal in color. They're not links like these ones. So I can't click on there to see what that demand is. I can't see what the dependent demand is. I can't see the supply. But that's okay. I'm fine with that. But you can see here I've got much more interesting independent demand, dependent demand, and current supply. To give you an example, for example, the boxes here, or the maple is probably a good one. I need 240.40 probably to get up to minimum stock. And I need another 1,471 as well for dependent demand. So I'll need 1,471 units of maple to make other products, which are probably all of these products up here. If we go to the errors, to show here, so yeah, there's still a bunch here that have the same, like no supplier and no information. So it wasn't the errors that were doing it, which is really interesting. Although, before I had critical warning and information errors, I've only got these ones now. So yeah, I think it was loading the demand with the details. Now if we go to suggested supply orders, this is a lot more interesting. So just to explain what's happening here. So we've got the demand in Melbourne warehouse. We consolidated the orders, so we've now got a lot more interesting required by dates. Again, we've got a lot of historical required by dates as well. And we've got purchases, transfers, and assemblies here as well. So what this is doing is looking to transfer products in. So you'll see there is some products it's bringing in from the Sydney warehouse. So it's going to take 117.98 of these. I could set that to round if I wanted to, because I can't take 0.98 of a dining chair. It's going to purchase some products here. So, for example, here, ABC Furniture is going to purchase a lot of these products in. There's also a transfer bringing products in from the production facility as well. And there's some assemblies that it's going to set up as well to produce a sofa and to produce bulk powder. So, hopefully that all makes sense. That's doing an awful lot more there. So it's then looking and saying, cool, what products do we need to produce certain products? What underlying ingredient products do we need? And it's doing a lot more of that work in advance. So you can see everything that it's saying it needs all at the certain points here. Last little piece I want to show then is running this with a forecast. So the easiest way to get a forecast for the MRP, or at least to get a starting block, is if you go to reports, sale reports, and drop all the way down to sales demand forecast. This will start the system off. There's a bunch of settings here, which are fairly self-explanatory. And there is also, if you go to help, there's a help file there. If you go into field specifications, there's a bit more information on what's going to be produced. So here, as an example, we'll look at last year to this year with 10% growth. We'll look at the month to come and weekly intervals. for Melbourne Warehouse. You'll see here there are some errors for products that we haven't sold in that period. But if we look at the demand forecast, you'll see there is some demand forecasted. Now, in this case, it's forecasting we're going to sell a third of a chair each week because, oh, actually, no, sorry, I need to regenerate this. Forgive me. But it will show that we're going to sell very, very limited. Yeah, so we're going to sell very, very limited units because it's a demo system. We just don't put that much through the system. So going back here for just a moment, let's have a look and see. Let's do something else here. What's my best way of doing this? Let's. I don't know how much fun this will cause, but we'll just give it a go. Okay, gives us something there. So what I can then do is I can export this, and you'll see there is a CSV which is MRP formatted. So if we export this, this will be in the exact format that the MRP needs to read it to then be able to get the reordering that we need. So first off, I'll just go and show you what this looks like as well. Because you can also manipulate this if you wanted to. So even if you get the forecast as a starting point, you can always go through and amend this as you wish to. So you'll see that it's basically doing one set of demand for each weekly period here, all the way through. So if I wanted to, I could then change these and say, well, I think we're going to sell a few more dining tables. We're going to do 4 a week, etc., etc., etc. I actually don't know why that's pulled that out with one without a required by date, but I'll just get rid of that just in case it causes it any fun. We should find that this is exactly as required to get the MRP forecasting. So if we now jump into the MRP, rerun this, exactly the same settings as last time for 3 of the 4 columns. So we'll now go this month for main location. We'll tick here to include the forecast demand, and then pop that up there. We could also just download the template and just free form it, but it's going to be easier to start off the predictions of the system. And we'll run this. So we'll get a very, very similar result because we're still going to be transferring some products in. Again, that was much faster, more like I'd expect. So you'll see here, we've now got our demand running through here. We've got a lot of these products in. So you'll see where we need 10, we've got 16, where we need 10 here, we've got 35. So if we go to the results, if we go to the suggested orders, just turn off products. Oh, damn, and I didn't, actually, no, that's a good thing. I did not consolidate these. So so there's 1 order per week. You'll see there's assemblies and there's transfers. So we obviously have all the underlying ingredients for all these products. So chairs need lumber and glue and nails and things like that. We've obviously got all of them in stock because if we look at Melbourne, we kind of keep that stocked for all of our demos. So we've got thousands of units of things in stock. So we don't need to purchase anything there. But what this is going to do is put a bunch of transfers in for basically everything we need each week for the productions. And it's going to start both the assemblies and the production as well for those products. So, very, very long run on video, but hopefully that gives you kind of a 101 of everything there. I fully expect that will lead to a whole bunch of questions. It's kind of the idea, but hopefully useful to get you going for the moment.